My name is Nate Mickle. You're listening to Mickles and Dimes, where every episode is dedicated to the simple, practical, and underappreciated. Hortense le Gentil is an executive coach, author, and leadership expert who has worked extensively with C-suite leaders on authentic leadership and personal transformation. She's the author of the book The Unlocked Leader, which has been read and recommended by Ralph Lauren, Arianna Huffington, and Marshall Goldsmith, among others. Hortense argues that too many leaders remain trapped in the outdated myth that they must be superhero leaders, infallible, unflappable, and fearless, even though the human leaders who embrace empathy, vulnerability, and authenticity are proven most effective. I hope you enjoy learning from Hortense le Gentil today. Hi, Hortense. Great to connect today. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a joy.
So I'm curious to hear about an experience you had where you learned something that you would most want to pass on to others.
You know, years ago, at one point in my life, I was not aligned. I was not, I knew that I had to make change, but it was very difficult decision because, I had children at that moment. I had a job, but I felt like really I was not where I should be. So I felt completely locked. And instead of taking the decision, I waited. I was there waiting for, I don't know what, the good time, the right time, or, something happened. And then, of course, when you don't do that kind of things, when you don't do you make the decision when you know you should make a decision, even if it's difficult, what happened is your body is speaking more than your brain. And then I got sick, very sick, for months. I was in bed. And then I had a dream. And at that moment, I had a dream, and my grandmother, who was very, very wise woman, I'm sure you would love her, Nate. And she was right. She was great, and she just came in my dream, and she just goes like, "You have to find the path of roses, Hortense." And I said, "What? What is it? I don't know what she was talking about." And then I said, okay, but where is it? Where is it? Show me the road. She just smiled at me and she just said, "Oh, you know where it is." And she disappeared. And then can you imagine? I woke up like I was furious because she sounds like she knew and she didn't give me the answer. What kind of grandma is she? And that would be later that I will understand how, this message was important. What she meant was that I had to listen to my inner voice. I had to listen to, to my instinct. And I knew exactly the road. I knew exactly what to do. And then when I started to do that, instead of, listening to others, no, you cannot do that. No, you cannot change your path. No, you cannot be an entrepreneur. And especially in France, it's a lot of no, 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 you cannot. And then when I just decided, okay, be courageous enough, start the change. And this is what I did. And at that moment, what I learned is it was the first day of the rest of my life. I freed myself. And it was not easy. No, it's not about an easy path. It's about healthy path. It's about success. It's about, becoming who you need to become. Then it's about be authentic, be you. Be you is absolutely okay. I don't know who is listening to me, but be you is okay because the world needs you. Doesn't need, somebody else or, or a repetition of somebody else. So the first lesson and the big lesson is be yourself, be courageous enough to listen to your inner voice. You know what to do. Listen to all the voices. And, sometimes we have voices. I call that a mind trap. In my books, this is how I call them. It's at one point we have some beliefs or expectations that help us to grow up, and then at one point it doesn't help us anymore. I don't know if you never had this experience, but it felt like it doesn't work anymore. And then this is a clue to tell you it's time to let go of those voices and to unlock yourself and to be courageous enough to start, the first, to take the first decision and take the first step to be authentic, to be yourself, to go on your own path.
Really interesting because I can so easily relate to what you're talking about. When I was 29, well, even before that, I just think about so many of the kind of turning points in my life happened because I ignored what I felt were some sort of like cultural or social expectation of me, and I just went with what
Mhm.
I wanted to do. So I was playing college football, and I was probably the oldest person, one of the oldest people in all of college football, and certainly the oldest person on my team. And some of my older friends are like, "Why, you're still playing football?" It's like, "Yeah, but I love it. I want to keep doing it." When I started law school, I was 29. When I started a PhD, I was 32. When I started a postdoc, I was 37. If I listened to all of the cultural expectations uh, around that, it's like, you're too old. What are you doing? Why are you switching careers? Why are you like, you haven't figured out life? It takes courage to listen to that inner voice, but I'm so glad I did. And so I love to hear your experience where you went through the same thing, where you weren't feeling quite right. You had the courage to make a decision. And then once you made that decision, you could tell it wasn't easy, but then you could tell you were on the right path.
Exactly. Exactly. And from there, for in my story, I had to do a lot of change. But I mean, at that time, I left my marriage, but with my two children. But I started to be an entrepreneur, and this is absolutely
Mm.
what I wanted to do. To be an entrepreneur, I wanted to innovate, to create. I wanted to do things by myself, and for years. And then I started to be an entrepreneur, and my first company was the recycling steel industry.
Mm.
Nothing to do with what I did
Wow.
before. Um, but that's where also I learned that be authentic, be you, don't pretend to be somebody else is very helpful. Because I came up, in a very open mind setup, state of mind at that moment. And then I remember a time that at the beginning, I was, it was a room full of engineers, and I'm not an engineer, but I am, the co-CEO of this company, and I'm not an engineer, and I'm the only woman.
Mm.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So what happened is, of course, nobody looked at me, or just it was like I was completely invisible. And then, okay, so of course I was quite afraid because I said, "What can I do? Because I cannot pretend to be an engineer, and but I need, to participate. I want to understand." And then I just listened for a long, for a long time, and then I took my courage and I asked a question. I was very stressed because I thought, "Oh my goodness, maybe the question is stupid. I don't know," but I just was myself and I told them, I asked this question, I don't remember the question. And I remember only, all the guy, turning in the room and watching at me and say, "Oh, she talks. Oh, she is a person." And then we started a conversation because, okay, so the question was not that stupid. And at one point, I just told them, I just said, "I'm not an engineer and I'm here to learn. So I would like you to teach me what I should know, because I want to learn."
Mhm.
And it was really a turning point. These vulnerabilities, this openness, the authenticity. They told me after. They told me that and I felt it. I felt like it was the first step to trust. And then we started from there and we built something absolutely great all together with a lot of trust, a lot of respect. Because of that, they told me at that moment, later they would tell me, when you just, pronounce those words and you just told us you want to know and you are not an engineer, so you didn't pretend to be someone who you were not. my job was not to do that. My job was, to be a leader and to, do something else. And but not that. Everything changed, and everything changed at that moment. So if I have a message here, it's be you. Don't try or pretend to be someone else, and be, open enough to tell, when you don't know, and just, ask for help, because this is how you create trust and respect in your, everywhere. It's true in leadership, but it's true everywhere. So people want to connect with you, want to know who you are, if they see your humanity, not if they see your facade. And then, okay, and then years later, so this is what I did. And I created this amazing company for a while, for a decade. And then after a decade, I felt like I wanted to change again, and I didn't know exactly what to do. And then, but it was a friend of mine who asked me and told me to help a friend of his. And he told me he is an entrepreneur and you can help him. And by the way, you should be a coach because you are so good at that.
Mhm.
And I said, no, I'm not going to be a coach. I don't know what a coach is, but yes, of course, I'm going to help your friend. But he put some seeds, in my brain. And at that moment, I thought, okay, so what did I learn all those years? I learned one thing: stay and be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. So if you want to try to coach somebody, what that means to you. And then, I said, okay, I'm going to try my way. And then, I just started, to talk with this person. And at that moment, I just felt that everything that happened in my life led me to come here, led me to learn what I learned in my life, personally, professionally. So it's all about leadership, but more than that, it's about spirituality. It's about, psychology. It's about people. It's about behavior. All that I learned for me. Sorry, it's here to help others. And then everything to say that if you're courageous enough one day to start, to take the first step to change or to be yourself, and like you said, like you share, not listen to, the environment, um, you will discover something great. Something absolutely great will happen because you're going to make your own talent grow, and then you're going to be successful, happy, and you will do more and more, and you will do a big difference in the world. And the world is waiting for you, and the world needs that. And then if I have, another advice, if today, if you want to take the first step, think about two things: how you want to show up. How do you want to show up as a person, as a leader? How do you want to be remembered? It's time to think about it. It's not at the end of your life that you're going to think about it. It's now, whatever, your age. It's important. And then the second question I have for you, or advice, is be aware of the stories that get in your way to be authentic. Do you have a voice, somebody voice, uh, that is not yours and doesn't help you?
Yeah, really interesting. I had a lot of ideas that were coming to me, but one I just wanted to mention was years ago, a friend recommended a book. Point basically, the takeaway was when you're dating someone, if they behave in all these ways that indicate they're just not that into you, your goal shouldn't be to pretend to be the person that you think they would be interested in. The point is go find somebody else who is into you. And I just loved that book. It's such a simple idea, but I mean, another way of saying it is be yourself. Don't waste your time trying
Yes.
to predict what others want and then pretend to be that person. You're in that meeting with the engineers. You could have, in that moment, pretended to know what they were talking about. You could have tried to predict what you thought they wanted you to say, but instead you were just authentic. You were yourself. And I love that advice to just be who you are and let whatever consequences follow.
Mm. Yes, yes. And the more you are true to yourself, in fact, the more again, and the more you're going to find the right person, the right person, the right person, right lover, right friends, right whoever it is. If you want to pretend, you cannot, and you cannot all your life pretend you are somebody else. Or some people do that, but mm, I don't think they are very happy and very successful.
And fortunately, you had a grandma who helped you implement that lesson. Well, Hortense, this was so great. Thank you for sharing your experience with me, something so personal that impacted your life so profoundly. It's such a great lesson. I hope we can all do a better job of being who we are and not letting others kind of dictate what we should be or who we should try to become. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, and yeah, and don't let others define who you are.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mickles and Dimes. Hortense had been ignoring her inner voice and had become physically ill for not making the decisions she knew she needed to make. But thanks to a dream of her wise grandmother, Hortense decided to find her path of roses and make choices she knew she needed to make. That included leaving her marriage and becoming an entrepreneur. Later, as the CEO of her company, in a room full of engineers, she gained the trust of the engineers not by pretending to be one, but by honestly admitting what she didn't know. As Hortense said, the world doesn't need a repetition of someone else. The world needs us to be courageous enough to be ourselves. It's a simple idea. Please take it seriously.